Between 1975 and 1979, Pol Pot's commanders killed roughly 1/4 of Cambodia's population, an estimated 1.5 to 2 million people. Yet only 3 of those commanders ever faced a final criminal verdict. The man who ran S-21 prison, where at least 14,000 prisoners were tortured and executed, initially received just 35 years. The regime's second-in-command lived freely until 2007 and died of old age in detention. And Pol Pot himself? He never stood trial at all. When Vietnamese forces crossed the border in January 1979, the architects of that genocide vanished into the jungle, leaving behind mass graves and a shattered nation. Within months of that flight, the new Vietnamese-backed government in Phnom Penh staged what it called the People's Revolutionary Tribunal. On 24 September 1979, the court sentenced Pol Pot and Foreign Minister Ieng Sary to death in absentia. But the verdict carried no international weight, and the men it condemned were already untouchable, sheltered in remote bases along the Thai border. For nearly 2 decades, senior Khmer Rouge leaders lived freely in those enclaves or negotiated comfortable defections with the very government that had once denounced them. Some farmed, some traded gems, some commanded loyal soldiers who still saw them as liberators. The men who had emptied cities, abolished money, and engineered the deaths of nearly 2 million Cambodians were not hunted across continents. They were neighbors, businessmen, retired officers, and Cambodia's political class chose, again and again, to let them stay that way, protected by China's veto at the UN and Thailand's border camps. Take Ieng Sary, the regime's foreign minister and one of the men condemned to death in 1979. In August 1996, King Norodom Sihanouk granted him a royal pardon as part of a negotiated defection. Sary moved into a villa in Phnom Penh, ran a business in Pailin, and lived openly for more than a decade, as if the verdict against him had never existed. Pol Pot's own ending was stranger still. By 1997, he was not arrested by any court or international force, but by Tamak, a rival commander inside the collapsing Khmer Rouge itself. The movement staged a crude show trial in the jungle and sentenced him to house arrest, an internal purge dressed up as accountability. On April 15, 1998, Pol Pot died on a wooden bed in a hut near the Thai border, reportedly of heart failure. He was 72. No international judge ever questioned him. No survivor ever confronted him in a courtroom. His body was burned on a pile of old tires and trash within days before any foreign investigator could examine it. The architect of one of the 20th century's worst genocides escaped justice not through cunning legal defense, but through time, distance, and a world that looked away until he was beyond reach. Pressure for a real tribunal would only build after his pyre had gone cold, when the man himself was already ash and memory, leaving survivors who would never hear him answer for what he did. It took until 2006 for the United Nations and the Cambodian government to formally open the extraordinary chambers in the courts of Cambodia, the ECCC, a full 27 years after the regime's collapse. Nuremberg began 6 months after Berlin fell. In Cambodia, the gap was a full generation. Witnesses had died, documents had rotted in the tropics. Many suspects were already in their 70s and 80s. Between 2006 and 2022, the tribunal spent more than $300 million. For that sum, it secured final convictions against just 3 men. The first was Kaing Guek Iev, known as Duch, the commander of S-21. Between 1976 and 1979, his prison processed at least 14,000 people. Only a handful walked out alive. Duch personally signed execution orders, approved torture methods, and kept meticulous records of confessions extracted by beating, electric shock, and waterboarding. In July 2010, the court sentenced him to 35 years, reduced for time served to as little as 19. The verdict was so lenient that survivors wept in the courtroom in disbelief. Only on appeal, in February 2012, was his sentence increased to life imprisonment. Duch died in custody in September 2020. He remains the only Khmer Rouge commander to have admitted in detail what he did. And even his confession came decades late, inside a courtroom that almost did not exist, long after most of his victims had been forgotten by the world. The other two convictions targeted the men at the very top of the chain. Nuon Chea, Pol Pot's chief ideologue and brother number 2, was arrested only in September 2007, nearly 30 years after the regime fell. Khieu Samphan, the regime's nominal head of state, was detained the same year. In August 2014, both were sentenced to life imprisonment for crimes against humanity. Then, in November 2018, the court went further and convicted them of genocide against the Vietnamese and Cham Muslim minorities, the first time any Khmer Rouge leader was formally branded a genocidaire under international law. But the clock had already run out for most of the others. Nuon Chea died in detention on August 4, 2019, aged 93, with appeals still pending. Tamak, the one-legged military commander known as the Butcher, had been captured on December 25, 1998. He sat in a military prison for nearly 8 years, but died in July 2006 before the tribunal could try him. Ieng Sari, finally arrested in 2007 after his royal pardon was set aside, died in March 2013 before any verdict. His wife, Ieng Thirith, Minister of Social Affairs and one of the few women in the inner circle, was declared unfit to stand trial in 2012 due to advanced dementia. She was released and died quietly in 2015. One by one, the defendants died before verdict, not through legal maneuvering, but through age itself, leaving justice incomplete and survivors without closure. Today, only one convicted senior commander is still alive. Khieu Samphan, now in his 90s, remains in detention, the sole living face of accountability for a regime that murdered nearly 2 million people. Set that beside other reckonings, and the gap becomes the turning point of this entire story. West Germany prosecuted around 6,500 individuals for Nazi crimes between 1945 and the late 1990s. The Yugoslav tribunal convicted more than 160. Cambodia convicted 3. Cases 3 and 4, targeting mid-level commanders, were quietly shut down after years of investigation amid open accusations of political interference. Former Khmer Rouge cadres reintegrated into the National Army, the police, and local government. Some sit today in provincial offices, drawing pensions from the state, in villages where the families of their victims still live. The machinery of justice moved too slowly, and by the time it arrived, most of the guilty had already disappeared into old age or death, leaving behind a country still haunted by their crimes. Across the 20th century, the pattern repeats with brutal consistency. Mass atrocities produce mountains of dead, mountains of evidence, and then, almost always, a handful of convictions, a few elderly defendants, and a long, quiet drift back to ordinary life for nearly everyone else. Cambodia is not the exception. It is the rule made unusually visible. The truth Pol Pot's commanders left behind. For crimes of this scale, justice almost never arrives, and the men who shaped that outcome from outside Cambodia's borders are a story still waiting to be told.